Good day, folks. This is your hillbilly historian coming to you from the hills of East Tennessee to give you some history that you'll never read about in your history books, high school or college. This is knowledge straight from the hills of Appalachia that you won't get anywhere else. A little bit of Scottish knowledge that the English don't want you to know. But I want to give you the lesson that Al Capone taught America. Now, Al Capone was a gangster, murderer, killer, bad guy, really bad guy. But he was extremely intelligent, and he rose to the top of his profession. And even though he was a bad guy, he had a lot of street smarts and a lot of common sense and intelligence, which guided his way. Except he had a thing for wild women, and that cost him in the end. And he also got some real smart bureaucrats after him that came up with a tax evasion scheme, and they were able to railroad him for tax evasion and give him 11 years in prison. And he didn't do well at Alcatraz. Them ice cold summers and out there just about wiped him out. But anyway, Al Capone taught us a lesson that's still true today and still in operation today. Now I want you to think about this, and think hard. The thing about giving, donating, paying off, kickbacks, your church asks for a tithe, T-I-T-H-E, a tithe. Now, a tithe is 10% of your gross income. 10% of everything you earn should go to your church, according to your ministers and priests and all them kind of people that want your money for fictitious reasons and other things, and scare the shebezus out of you with tales of heaven and hell and all that kind of crap. But anyway, the church wants 10% of your gross income, everything you earn. Now, Al Capone taught us a lesson that business still uses today. That our politicians and our police officers and our bureaucrats are so corrupt that they will sell their souls for very, very small amounts of money. Now, Al Capone taught us that it's easier to buy people off than it is to compete. It is cheaper, less expensive to buy people off than it is to compete. Think about that. He taught us that. Al Capone taught us that our officials who are hired to serve and who take oaths to serve the people and the Constitution and the country will sell out for practically nothing, pocket change. And let me give you a prime example. Today, businesses learn this lesson real well, super well, because businessmen are usually the more intelligent people among us. I don't care what your colleges say, their professors suck when it comes to common sense and rationality and moral thought. good logical thinking based on the Baconian theory of logic. Now, businesses are smart, run by smart people. And they learned Al Capone's lesson real well. If you take the top 200 corporations in America today, you'll find that they pay 1% of net for lobbying. Now, what is lobbying? Lobbying is donating money to politicians to get them to vote for your agenda. 1% of net. Now, what is net? Net is after all the bills are paid. That is profit. That is what the owners of the company and the stockholders are able to cash out on. That is their profit. 1% of net. Our politicians and bureaucrats are too stupid and ignorant to ask for 1% of gross, which would 1% of net makes all our senators and congressmen millionaires, multi-millionaires. But if they were smart, they could be billionaires easily by asking for gross instead of net. Let me give you an example. The pharmaceutical industry spent $400 million getting senators and congressmen to pass a law. Now there's 535 of these people that have to be donated to or paid off. And 400 million means few of them got a few million. Most of them got maybe 10,000 or 5,000 or 15,000. This was lobbying money. 400 million was spent to get a law passed to where pharmaceutical companies could not be sued that if they gave you a drug that caused your arms and legs to fall off, that you couldn't sue them for damages. The pharmaceutical industry profited $80 billion the first year alone from this one law, and they only spent $400 million, 1%, to get that law passed. Now you tell me that ain't good thinking and smart thinking, that they know that our politicians are so cheap that they will sell their souls. Now they still end up taking home a few $1,000,000, sometimes in the tens and 20s and 30s of millions, 60 million, 200 million. I think Nancy Pelosi went home with about 212 million. Mitch McConnell went home with about 30, somewhere between 35 and $60 million. And they don't do anything except vote occasionally. And they do very little work. They have huge staffs, which actually, if there's any work to be done, their staffs are the ones that do it. Now, what's interesting is they don't get anywhere near what they could get if they had the kahunas, but they don't. They're politicians. All they do is lie to the public for their votes, and then lie to their public about how they're voting and why they're voting the way they're voting. And these people, Al Capone taught us that they can be bought off real cheap. And you think about that 1% that goes into lobbying. The lobbyists themselves, the ones who distribute the money, take a huge cut. So therefore, your politicians are ending up probably less than 1%, half of 1% of net, not gross, net. They're not getting anything. And who taught us that lesson? Al Capone, a gangster, taught us how cheap our bureaucrats and politicians and judges and police and people can be bought off. It was an interesting lesson in history that our businessmen caught on to real quick. And that's why the real intelligent businessmen pay no taxes. None. Bezos, I think one year paid zero taxes on something like 40, 50 billion profit. But he definitely pays off the right people, and he knows he only has to pay 1% of net. It's amazing, isn't it? The lessons you learn if you look at American history carefully. That Al Capone taught us one of the biggest lessons in American history and world history. That politicians, police, bureaucrats, government employees are so corrupt that they sell their souls for pocket change. And you got that lesson, that history lesson, from your hillbilly historian from the hills of East Tennessee here in Appalachia. Good day, folks.